Hi Srihari.
Hi, Karan.
So today we are going to discuss something interesting. It's something about coups actually in India. A lot of
Yes,
people confuse it with coups, but no, it's called coups. COUPS, which is basically
yes,
when a regime is overthrown out of the blue by someone else, a group of people or whatnot, and then
indeed.
never really returns to power again. So I wanted to ask you, what is that one undisputed indicator that a coup has truly succeeded and not just captured power temporarily?
Okay. So, by definition, the circumstances in which a coup is executed, it is often illegal, right? And in most of the regimes that we see, in most of the governments that we see in past or in modern day, so coups are of different types. Some happen slowly, some happen very quickly in one night's time. Some are well orchestrated, some are just happening by chance, एकदम से outburst हो जाता है. So such things are happening. But what calibrates the success of a coup is that it eventually stabilizes itself. It sits properly at the position of the government, and with time, the resistance that coup has faced initially, it gradually slows down and it ultimately dies down. Okay. So, of course, when a coup is recently executed, there will be two different factions: the factions which supported the previous government and the faction which is supporting the coup. But if a coup is able to attract, or if it is able to eliminate the second faction, मतलब या तो उनको attract करके या तो उनको eliminate करके, if they are trying to bring them and if they are trying to stabilize their position, and if they are also successful in, because coup is not happening in a limited place, its implications are on a larger geographical region of that particular state or country, and if they are able to win the public's approval, so it is that aspect which makes a coup successful or a long standing coup, among others, especially in terms of post independent world, like post World War II world, where democracy has taken the control of the entire world, of the entire governments. I think this is the main strategy which makes a coup successful, because prior in monarchy, power was vested within one individual. So of course there were different government bodies, there were different boards of politicians, there was constituency back then, right? But then again, ultimately the monarch was responsible for everything, and there were a lot of private issues happening between monarch and his military, with his ministers, which caused a lot of instability in the past. But with more democratic forms of government in modern time, in the modern world, I think this is something which can make a coup more stable if the new regime is able to secure the favor of people of the different aspects of the government, different ministries, the constituencies, etc.
So, do you think it's actually harder to execute a coup in the modern world today, considering someone, even though there is a prime minister that we have in our country and he's in Delhi,
Yeah,
seated out of his office, which is inaccessible to almost 99.99% of the people, it still feels like he's close to us. He's someone who we can reach out to in some form or shape, but he's someone who definitely is trying to connect with everyone as much as possible to whatever way or shape. Whereas the idea that you had of a kingdom in medieval times and before is a king in a castle or in a mahal somewhere where there is a darbar
correct.
and the king only hears about the workings of the economy or of the country through those few people who are responsible for updating him, and he's making the decisions based on their information only without um, and it didn't feel like the king would really step out, go around the place too much, be a chief
Absolutely.
or cut a ribbon somewhere. I, I mean, it felt like their daily routine was very set. They would wake up when they wanted to. They would go
Correct, correct.
go through some kind of military training, or then they would have their bar. Then they would
No,
engage.
but when we see in the medieval form of governments, like king, despite he being the sole authority, there was a certain time, because when we see political dynasty, the founder of the dynasty is generally very strong because he has come through all the odds to establish that particular dynasty. Take any dynasty in Indian history or world history, for example. So the first ruler is generally the strongest, and he is able to stay there for a considerable amount of time. And if he's making an impact, then of course his successors also have that power. But एक होता है ना, एक top phase आता है, bad circumstances create strong men, and strong men create not
Bad
good times, and
circumstances.
good times create bad people.
Yeah,
Bad circumstances.
I know what you're talking
Exactly.
about. It's they say that hard times create good men
Exactly.
create easy
Easy
times create
times.
bad men create hard times, and the cycle again continues.
So, irrespective if we are living in a monarchical world, if you are living in an oligarchical world, or if you're living in a democratic world, these rules are eternal. These are universal realities. So, even when we see in modern governments also that when a government becomes too autocratic, जब वो हो जाता है, जब वो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन को लांग कर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के ऊपर खुद के ऊपर जाकर जब वो ऐसा एक regime बना लेते हैं, then of course there is opposition. Like in 1975 we have seen that emergency. So emergency was not a coup in any sense that any external parties coming, any military issues are being raised in India, despite that being the time, when Bangladesh was recently happening, and Indira Gandhi ji उन्होंने सैम मानेकशॉ फील्ड मार्शल को पूछा था कि जैसा पाकिस्तान में याह्या खान और अयूब खान ने मिलिट्री कू किया था, तो क्या आप भी मुझ पर कब्जा करना चाहते हैं, क्या आप भी मिलिट्री रिजाइम लाना चाहते हैं इंडिया पे. सो सैम मानेकशॉ ऑफ कोर्स ही वाज अ मैन ऑफ लेटर्स, तो उन्होंने ऐसा कुछ इंडिकेशन दिया नहीं, एंड आई थिंक ही रिस्पोंडेड विद अ वेरी स्मार्ट रिस्पांस व्हिच आई एम अनेबल टू रिकलेक्ट नाउ. But we see that even when India was faced with difficult times, when such issues were happening in India, there was a lot of political resistance. तभी कांग्रेस में हम देखते हैं कि कितना बदलाव हुआ, कितने factions हुए, जनता दल emerge हुआ, then again Indira Gandhi fell down, Morarji Desai came, and in a democratic new country, newborn country like India, ऐसे situations में से भी हम लोग बड़े, I would say बड़े आसानी से without a lot of bloodshed निकले हैं, right? Take Pakistan on the contrary. Pakistan में since both of us gained independence during the same year, right? But since 1950s throughout 1970s कितने military regimes आ चुके हैं, right? We have Yahya Khan, we have General Ayub Khan, we have General Ziaul Haq. So democracy and military regime in Pakistan is always at crossroads. India mein the democracy is something which is controlling all the other aspect. It is having a very strong hold on defense. So the person on the top, the prime minister, is डायरेक्टिंग कि आपको क्या करना है, आपको किस फ्रंटियर पे, आपको किस थिएटर पे ध्यान देना है. बट इन पाकिस्तान इट वाज हैपनिंग अदरवाइज. इट वाज द मिलिट्री रेजिम, बिकॉज पाकिस्तान इनहेरिटेड वेरी गुड डिफेंस सिस्टम, चाहे वो एयरफोर्स में हो, चाहे वो आपके आर्मी में हो, चाहे वो नेवी का, तो आई कांट से, बट व्हेन इट कम्स टू एयरफोर्स एंड army, Pakistan generally had a very good strong case back then. Of course, I mean, times change and everything changed, which caused a lot of power accumulation with the military regimes. A success of a coup depends. The time frame is definitely not decided, and nobody can say that एक particular time ही pass होना चाहिए coup को successful होने के लिए. There are a lot of variables, but in general understanding, if one generation has passed where the people who were actually involved in coup on either sides, whether supporting the coup or opposing the coup, they have sustained through that period without raising any opposition. And the new generation which is coming, if they are not raising any concerns, if they are not expressing any issues with regards to the regime, with regards to the government, form of government at the top, then I think that is the most successful determinant of how a coup has functioned in that particular political arena or in that society. So, of course, a coup can last for as long as it has to, based on the circumstance. But I think one generation is the minimum time to gauge its success. Or yeah.
Got it. Tell me something. One thing you mentioned, we spoke about Pakistan. We also saw that happen about military coups in Pakistan. We also saw that happen in Burma, where Aung San Suu Kyi was removed from power and the military took over the military junta. So they call it.
Yes.
Military coups are very, very common, especially since the post-World War II world. After military coups, what has been the largest reason or largest kind of coup that has happened? If military coups are number one, what is the second most?
Second most important coups are something which people execute. I think that is a civil coup,
Okay.
because sometimes military is there, but again there are different types of coups. So the kind of involvement that military has, it often results in a lot of violence, and it often causes a lot of displacement. It causes a lot of issues. It causes a lot of trust issues. It causes difficulty in forming a body of government. But if military involvement is less, then I think civil coups are next prominent thing which happen, because again civil coups are more important in this perspective, that it has direct involvement of people, that people from different classes of society, from different backgrounds, socio-economic backgrounds, they're involving. And military coup is a very focused thing, because only the top elites are involved in it. But when we speak about civil coups or people's coup, then I think it is a more serious issue, because we see that more and more people are joining, and they are ready to die. They are protesting. They are taking matters into their own hands, and they are not afraid of any police action, any military action. The kind of scenario we see in Iran today, I think that is something which corresponds to the kind I'm talking about. We even have an example in post-independence India, but I think it's better saved for the later part.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what happened during the Arab Spring as well could have been a good example in Libya, in Egypt.
Yes, yes, yes,
Those
yes.
are all civil coups where the population was so done that they didn't really care if they died themselves, as long as their future kin got to live a better life. And
Exactly. So this is what I think is a very intriguing aspect of speaking about coups, is that we don't know that when they evolve into a people's revolution. So the transition of a coup, from a military engagement, or from a change of government, from a consolidated change at the top bureaucratic and political level, to
yeah,
that of a people's revolution, it is a very nuanced, I would say. And what we generally call as a revolution can be termed as coup. What we call as coup can be termed as a revolution. So it again, it depends on
the eyes
uh,
of the beholder.
yeah, eyes of the beholder, and how you align yourself in that political atmosphere, I would say.
So was the French Revolution the earliest sign of civil coup at that scale that we know of, or were there any before that maybe I'm not aware of across the world? I'm talking about.
Across the world, again, I am not that well read to speak about across the world at this point, honestly. But I think French Revolution is one of it has that proper indications of being a civil coup. Like personally, I would like to call it that. Of course, I mean the gurus of this subject might have something better to offer on this.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. So you mentioned that a successful coup is one where that same regime of power is able to stay in power for at least one generation. One generation, I'd assume, is about 2 to 3 decades, and they're able to
Approximately.
they're able to
Minimum is 2 decades actually.
got it, and they're able to pass on power to the next of line, whether it be a blood
Blood
next
हो गया या आपका political successor हो गया.
successor. Yeah, exactly. And let's in Indian history, I think we've seen a lot of coups.
Yeah.
So now we're going to focus on we're going to focus bulk of this conversation on ranking the top 5 coups in Indian history, starting
Yeah.
from number 5 to number 1. And what I want you to do is set the stage for each of those, right?
All
Give
right.
us the backdrop of what was happening, when this was happening, what are the factors that led to the coup? Why was that a very difficult coup to execute? And
Mhm.
ultimately, why do you think that that coup was one that was relatively successful? So let's start with number 5.
Okay. So, actually, you want me to start, matlab, as in you want me to start from the lowest ranking to the highest ranking, right? Or
Yes,
are we going to rank it later? Like, how do you want me to proceed?
lowest to highest,
Okay, I
according
see.
to you. It's a subjective thing, so
All right, all right. So the lowest ranking coup. See, again, now I have to give a disclaimer that the rankings that I have made, it's according to my own discretion, and maybe the audience which will listen to this podcast, they might have other opinions. Uh, but let's see. Let's actually navigate through this, because we are actually talking about a long, approximately 2000 to 2200 years of Indian history, and there are a lot of parameters as we are going to talk about. One of the important aspects of who is that it can be fast, it can be slow, it can be sharp, it can be sustained. So one such event has occurred in Mughal Empire, which was immediately after the death of Emperor Aurangzeb. So we know that Emperor Aurangzeb was undoubtedly the most powerful Mughal emperor, and one of the most powerful rulers in the history of Indian subcontinent. But when he passed away, he left a lot of enemies. He left a lot of factions. There was so much discontent and uh, competition among his successors, and other people tried to shoot up to that opportunity. Other people tried to grab that opportunity of his passing. So when Emperor Aurangzeb died in 707, then his immediate successor was his son Bahadur Shah the first, and he was able to rule only for a few years, I think barely a decade, and then he passed away. So the Bahadur Shah the first, I think he was the only ruler with some power at his hands, which made him a cognizable ruler in that period, because at that time Marathas, Jats, Sikhs, everybody was rising during that time. I'm speaking about the early decades of 18th century CE, and this disturbance led to a great misfortune on Mughal Empire, because in the Mughal royal lineage, a lot of princes were coming, they were being enthroned, and they were dying at very young age. There was a lot of political intrigue in the Mughal court, where regents became the de facto rulers of the Mughal Empire, and they were blinding emperors and princes, and they were directly interfering in the royal bloodline by acting as regents and by installing puppet rulers. So in this case, I have the story of Syed Brothers, and this Syed Brothers, they uh, were active in the Mughal politics from 1713 to till 1720. And these Syed brothers, actually, they are very powerful because they claim that they come from the clan of Sayyids. Okay, so Sayyids are a clan in Muslim society, which they directly claim that they descended from Prophet Muhammad. Because now they are claiming this lineage, which naturally makes them very strong and politically venerable, as well as in religious and social terms very high and powerful. Right. So uh, after Bahadur Shah, the first demise, the ruler was Jahandar Shah, which was installed. And at that time, the Sayyid brothers, whose respective names are Sayyid Abdullah Khan and Sayyid Hussain Ali Khan, they rose to prominence from Lahore. They came from a very poor and unstabilized background, but eventually they found their way into the Mughal court. And in that fragmented court politics of the Mughals, they helped install a new emperor, Farooq Shiar, on the throne. So this Farooq Shiar, he was grand nephew of Bahadur Shah the first, and literally Farooq Shiar, when they were about to install him, he faced uh, risk from Jahandar Shah, who wanted him to be deposed, because even if you are a Mughal emperor and your throne is secured, but if you have a lot of descendants, if you have your sons and nephews, right, so they can possibly
Challenge.
rise into revolt, right?
Yeah.
And it has happened in past where Jahangir rose in revolt to Akbar, and uh, sons of Jahangir rose in revolt to their father, and it has happened. Even Shah Jahan rose in revolt to Jahangir, by the way. So it was necessary to eliminate any political claimants. So Jahandar Shah told Syed brothers to eliminate Farooq Shiar, but Farooq Shiar in Bihar, he came into a treaty with Syed brothers, whereby he was promised the throne of the Mughal Empire, and in return, Farooq Shiar told Syed brothers कि भैया आपको मैं वजीर वगैरह बना दूंगा, I will give you top positions in the Mughal court, and that is how this agreement was made. Jahandar Shah was deposed, Farooq Shiar was made the emperor. But soon, because Farooq Shiar was very young at that time, he was in his 20s and 30s, and these Syed brothers, they were not political administrators. They came from a very high-fi military background, and they could often be seen fighting wars. They could often be seen engaging in different conflicts, and they had a very great experience of fighting wars in Indian landscape. Sayed brothers had military experience at each and every place, and because they had their brotherhood, because Sayed brothers दो नहीं थे, उनका एक अपना एक बरहा करके एक बहुत बड़ा clan हुआ करता था, which gained a lot of prominence during Farooq Shia's time. And because of their military prowess, they were very much feared in the Mughal court, and even within Farooq Shia's courtiers. Uh, the situation at Mughal court in Delhi at that time was that there were a lot of factions, right? So this factionalism within the Mughal court made Farooq Shah even more insecure, and through different means he tried to depose Syed brothers. Okay, and he sought support of Marathas ultimately to do that. The Syed brothers prevailed, and they blinded. I don't think they blinded, but they had Farooq Shah killed. Okay, and Syed brothers literally made became the kingmakers of Mughal Empire at that time during the middle of 18th century CE. And after Syed brothers were done away with Farooq Shah, they raised his nephews to become the king. And there were different kings that happened, puppet emperors, I would like to call them. And I am forgetting their names, but they were kings for like 2 to 3 years happened. Okay. And ultimately, they were completely under the control of Syed brothers. And even unka khana, pina, it used to be monitored by Syed brothers, and they had no private, independent private life or anything, right? And Syed brothers, they sat back, they claimed a lot of political power. They were the de facto rulers of the Mughal Empire. And ultimately, they were assassinated by the intervention of Nizamul Mulk, who was the first Nizam of Hyderabad. A lot of political intrigues happened. So we don't see any direct action happening in the court where a lot of bloodshed is happening. Of course, bloodshed was happening in the background. But as far as the court politics or the court dynamics of Delhi was concerned, the core Mughal family, as it was uh, being puppeted by the Syed brothers, we see that it was a slow poison for Mughal Empire at that time, and which further confirmed the breakdown of Mughal rule in India, because the emperor was only a de facto ruler, but there were always people such as Syed brothers who were trying to orchestrate the politics and gain power for themselves. So the reason that this coup is the reason I want to give is because after Syed brothers passed away, the case continued. The Mughal Empire was still there. Mughal Empire continued for another 100 years, so there was no direct threat to Mughal Empire as such. And Syed brothers, they did not interfere in politics. They did not change any systems. They still had the Mughal Empire as it was functioning on an administrative level. It continued to do so. Only the allegiance changed. Only new protagonists and new antagonists emerged with time. And as everything was happening, it was Mughal Empire was still on decline, and other parties such as Jats, Rohilas, Marathas, Sikhs, they were on the rise. So it did not have any long-standing impact or a very direct blow to Indian government, Indian history, or Indian politics at that time. It was a gradual draw of blood, I would say. So that's why it is the lowest.
Fair enough.
And
So,
coming, yeah, sure, sure.
to summarize, if you had to summarize this entire affair of the Syed brothers and what they did, from what I gauged was earlier Jahandar Shah was in power, then
Yeah,
the Syed brothers came, they they installed Farooq Siyar and deposed Jahandar Shah. Eventually,
yes,
Farooq Siyar got a bit disillusioned and jaded with them, so
exactly.
they had him murdered or they had him killed, but the reasons are unknown. I mean, it's still a bit fishy. And then ultimately, they themselves were killed by the Nizam of Hyderabad.
Yes.
That is this the broad
and
sequence?
and uh, and the important part is that they installed puppet kings, so they had that power to intervene in the family line, in the internal matters of the family, and they could pick any person, they could make them the king, and that is how they threatened Farooq Shah that if you will interfere in our business, then we have the puppets ready, we have dolls ready in our cupboard, so we can unpack them and we can install them on the throne.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, let's come to number four.
Number four, I would say, is comes from the time of modern India. It is post-independence, and it is the coup at Yanam. Okay, so Yanam is a union territory which falls in modern-day Andhra Pradesh, coastal Andhra, and it was a territory of the French. So even after India gained independence from the British, there were other parties such as Portuguese at Goa and French at Pondicherry and Yanam, who still continue to exercise authority over those territories, and they had still not ceded to India. And it was the 1950s when the French political power in India, when the French enclaves in India, they were being challenged, and Indian national movements gained a lot of momentum in these regions, because it was also the time when अपना जो Maharajas थे जो dominions of India's थे, the princely states of India's, they started merging with India. They started merging with the dominion of India, right? And everybody was uh, into the team. Like we had Nizams of Hyderabad, they joined India. We had Maharaja Hari Singh of Kashmir, he joined India, and Maharaja of Jamnagar. So
Yeah.
such princely states, they were merging into India, but there was no good news about these European enclaves in India. So, because Indian national movement, Indian independence movement, it was a moment which seeped into the minds of public. So, public started taking action at these different places. So, public movements became more prominent, especially at Yanam. And the key figure in this takeover of Yanam is Dadala Rafael Ramanaya. Okay. So at Yanam, we see that it is not completely French versus Indians, it is Indians versus Indians, because there were some Indians who were supporting the French regime, and there were Indians like who wanted that particular territory to be a part of India. So this division between Indian versus Indians, it led to a lot of face off. But the action which was happening at Yanam around 1950s, it was not a violent one for the major part, and they did not come and kill. It was mostly negotiated through diplomacy and discipline. And the role of French government at that time from France, and the communication they had with Indian government, it was largely positive. But whatever changes were happening, it was on ground at these different territories at Pondicherry, Mahe, and Yanam. And mostly mostly these activities were centered around Yanam, because it it had a great French inspired culture for a couple of centuries by this point. And in the point of view of Indian independence movement, this pro merger faction who wanted to merge with India, their movement was growing, and there was a declining in the anti merger faction of it. And this decolonization further escalated, where we see that uh, by 1954, a lot of administrative buildings, they were being claimed by the Indian freedom fighters, and Indian flag was raised upon those buildings. And the pro-Indian activists, they were able to mobilize a large mass scale support, and thousands of people were turning in, and they were trying to occupy these places, right? And the French military action, of course, the French military and the French police, they tried to dissuade them, they tried to open fire, they tried to take action against them, but they were soon overpowered by the common people, and ultimately they had to accept the defeat. And Yanam, it properly became, because of local resistance movement, it became a part of India. And officials, they fled, they went back to their native places, and ultimately territories such as Pondicherry and Yanam, they eventually, with the drift of time, they came to the Indian territories. So the reason that it is placed on the fourth rank or lower rung of our discussion is that there is, the reason for this coup is not that people at Yanam or people at Pondicherry, they wanted to establish their own government. So they wanted to gain independence from the French, and they wanted to merge to India, right? So they did not have their own vested interest in this particular aspect. So and of course their presence was very small, because the kind of power that these pro merger activists held, it was for a short period of time, it was for a few years, even after the French power was dismantled. So they became consulate generals, they rose to certain bureaucratic positions, but ultimately these bureaucratic positions, they were merged into the larger bureaucratic arrangements of India, so they did not have any individual power over that region. So it was a small action which had decisiveness. It had an impact in that particular point in time, but it did not leave any long-standing impact which would affect the larger geography of India, or in the sense of the consequences, right? Of course, India gained territory in geographical terms, but there were no adverse consequences or no notable consequences of that event as such.
So in the amongst these pro-merger activists, are
Yeah.
there any prominent names of people that stand out?
Uh, the name that I could currently remember, they have very difficult names, and those are Telugu names, but they are very much, they have a lot of French influence in them while writing them. The name that I could currently remember is Dadala Rafal Ramanaya, who was a spearhead of this pro-merger movement.
Got it.
Yeah, yeah.
Tadala Rafael.
Ramaniya.
Yeah, wow. All right. So, why would you rank this? See, considering this was such a non-violent coup, and this was done without any major bloodshed or major large-scale violence. I mean, from whatever you mentioned, I'm gathering that there was really no bloodshed whatsoever.
It
And
was because French opened fire, and it was a very minor bloodshed. It was not the kind of bloodshed which happens usually during war.
got it, got it.
Yeah.
All right. So number three.
Number three that I could think of is the deposition of Pushyamitra Shunga.
Okay.
And sorry,
Set
not
the stage
Pushyamitra
for
Shunga.
us.
Yeah, the coup which was executed by Pushyamitra Shunga, and how the Mauryan Empire it fell into decline, and it was completely de-established. So Mauryans they rose with Chandragupta Maurya, and the greatest ruler of amongst the Mauryan was Emperor Ashoka.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And Ashoka was a great patron of Buddhism, but at the same time he was a great warrior. He was a uh, warrior who later turned pacifist. Okay, and
Yeah.
even after he turned pacifist, does not mean that he lost all his military prowess. He was still able to secure a lot of his frontiers. His frontiers were as far as Afghanistan, and it touched the Dravidian territories. It went as far as the Pandya, Chera, and Chola territories. And his soft influence went as far as Sri Lanka and beyond. But after Emperor Ashoka, there were no prominent rulers in the Mauryan Empire. Why? Because his immediate successor, Mahendra, he was dispatched as a Buddhist monk to Sri Lanka. And there was another son of his name is Samprati. And Samprati was a so-so ruler. He did not do any, he was just able to manage the Mauryan territories at that time. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of political and biographical information about Ashoka's successors. And most of these information sources are from religious texts, Buddhist, both Buddhist as well as the Puranas, which were being composed at that time. So whatever we can infer from whatever evidence we have in these textual sources, as well as a few surviving inscriptions and coinage, we get to see that the later Mauryas after Ashoka, they did not wield that much of political influence, and Mauryan state was slowly disintegrating, and there were a lot of factions happening, and their vassalage was breaking from within. And it was during this time that local rulers and the ministers or the people who were involved in Mauryan bureaucracy, they themselves started to descend, they started disintegrating. And this continued for a few generations until the time of the last Mauryan king, whose name is Brihadrata Maurya. And in the line of succession of Mauryas, he is said to be the ninth king, I believe. So Brihadratha was a very weak ruler according to the sources, and he barely managed the affairs of the state. And his minister, one of his ministers, or his defense minister, or his commander in chief, was Pushyamitra Shunga. And we don't know any particular evidence exists whether if Brihadratha Maurya was a Buddhist or what, but generally it is believed that he was Buddhist because he followed what religion Ashoka followed. But Pushyamitra Shunga, it is said that he was a Brahmin. Okay, and Pushyamitra Shunga was definitely not happy with whatever was going on at Mauryan Empire, and he wanted to gain independence. He wanted to assert his own power. And once, when Brihadratha Maurya he was inspecting the military uh, of his empire at his capital, so Pushyamitra Shunga comes and he assassinates Brihadratha Maurya in front of the entire army. So even when Brihadratha Maurya is being assassinated, nobody raises any alarm. Everybody is just watching, they are witnessing the scene. And it happens very seamlessly, the murder of Brihadratha Maurya. But the way it is portrayed in literature is that King had a lot of religious differences with Pushyamitra Shunga, or the other way. Pushyamitra Shunga had a lot of problem with the rise of Buddhists, it is said, according to the Buddhist literature, but we don't really know whether if it is true or not. It is said that when Pushyamitra Shunga he came to power, he destroyed a lot of Buddhist stupas, but then again, we don't have any evidence to actually say that he destroyed stupas because during the Shunga period, a lot of new stupas were being built in India. But nonetheless, Pushyamitra Shunga, he became the king, and he was able to execute it very smoothly. There was no resistance, and it gives us a proof that Mauryan society, Mauryan empire, Mauryan politics was already at a decline. And Pushyamitra Shunga, the way he intervened, it is very controversial, but he was able to sustain the capital at Patliputra, and he was able to uh, maintain that state of affairs, the political state of affairs, and the geographical boundaries of India at the time when Greeks, the Indo-Greek kingdoms at the frontier, they were continuously engaging with Indians in a military way, in a very violent way, we can say the frontiers.
And how was Brihadratha killed?
He was most likely was stabbed. He was assassinated. We don't have a lot of information on that, but he was stabbed most likely.
And in front of the entire army.
Entire army.
Wow. And did Pushyamitra Shunga then manage to hold on to power for very, very long?
Yes. For several generations, the Shunga dynasty sustained. Pushyamitra ruled for approximately a few decades, at least 2 or 3 decades he was able to rule. His son was Agnimitra, and there were other Shunga kings that happened. And eventually, karma got back to Shunga dynasty. And even Shunga dynasty by 1st century CE, it was weakened, much like Mauryas. And Vasudeva Kanva, who was a minister, another Brahmin by this at this point, who was who was a minister of last Shunga emperor. He assassinated the emperor in the same way.
Okay, so I think this was definitely quite interesting. You know, of course, it's not obviously we don't glorify or glamorize murder or assassination,
Exactly.
but at the same time, when we do hear of stories like this, there's an element of fear as well as excitement and thrill that you get to know that this isn't just stuff that's there for the movies. This
Exactly.
actually happened in India as well.
So
So
lot of things we discuss about ancient India, they are not known to us, and a lot of legends and stories are constructed across it. And as we know that stories are written from the winner's perspective, so in these retellings, Chandragupta Maurya, he also became emperor in the same way. We'll discuss about him later. And Ashoka also, like Ashoka was also a person of very violent tendencies at his early career. Even Pushyamitra Shunga and Vasudeva Kanva, so they are glorified in our text because they are being written from the winner's perspective. So everything becomes good at the end when we look at it in that perspective.
I think we live in the era of strongmen, right? I think
Exactly.
always it's the one who lasted, the one who survived, the one who was able to trample over by hook or crook.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, very few people care about who was not rewarded. Like, for instance, if you think about, um, is there an example? Something like, I mean, it's a very small example and nothing violent about it, but
Certainly.
a lot of people believe that in the 2000 American elections, Al Gore was cheated out of the election, right?
Exactly.
And that there was definitely something that was fishy. But who cares now? No one, 25 years later, everyone remembers George W. Bush, but
Absolutely.
no one remembers Al Gore and what he stood for. And I think at the end of the day, history just rewards those who lasted, those who had the last laugh. So and it's yeah, everyone else in the way who was cheated out of that position gets lost. And we glorify that in shows as well. If you see House of Cards,
Indeed.
you see this movie, this show that came out in Maharashtra politics, Maya Nagari, or it's a very,
Mhm.
very okay show after a point, but where the lady, it was loosely based on tropes of Shiv Sena and CPM,
Correct.
and, and none of those have actually played out in real life, but they somehow blended it all together, and it was such a
So I
disaster.
remember that movie Rajniti very well. When when the person in position dies and how immediately they are replaced. So in politics, no matter however you are, you will be replaced. Even if you have the last laugh, then you have to be replaced. And death comes to politicians in very mysterious and in very demeaning ways that I've seen.
Yeah,
That's the downside of being a politician, that you might not die a very glorified death.
correct. Let's come to number two.
Okay, so when discussing number two, I'll take you to Delhi Sultanate, and the main person of interest over here is Alauddin Khalji, the star of this number two ranking. And Alauddin Khilji, he's a man of great controversies in popular culture as we know him. And the way in which Alauddin Khilji rose to power is also very controversial. Alauddin Khilji, who was a nephew of Jalaluddin Khilji, and they were of Turkic origin. They came from northwards, and Jalaluddin Khilji was able to overthrow the previous sultanates, and the sultanate system in India was very young at that point in time because Muhammad Ghori came. He took control of. He defeated Prithviraj Chauhan, and later he conquered Delhi. He established territories here, and he left slaves such as Kutubuddin Aibak to manage his territories in India. Then from Kutubuddin Aibak, it went to Iltutmish. From Iltutmish, it gradually transferred to Jalaluddin Khilji, who established the Khilji dynasty. And Jalaluddin did not have any successor in the form of son, any prominent person in that form. But his nephew, Alauddin, was very powerful. He was super ambitious, and he was able to take on that military responsibility, the responsibility of stabilizing his uncle's rule in Delhi since a very young age. And he was able to secure significant victories for uh, Jalaluddin Khilji at a very early period in his reign. And the situation in North India at that time, it was very sensitive because Delhi Sultanate was still in its infancy. A lot of negotiations were happening, a lot of communication with the Western world was happening, where they were trying to gain legitimacy for themselves by aligning themselves with the caliphate, right? And this was the situation. And when you look at the central and the southern part of India, they were affluent because the Hindu dynasties at that point, the Kakatiyas of Warangal, the Yadavas of Devagiri, and the Baghelas in Saurashtra and Gujarat, as well as the Hoysalas of Darasuram Cholas. They were functioning properly, and they were having their own issues in the central and south India. But Alauddin Khilji goes a step ahead, and he takes the control of Devagiri without his uncle Jalaluddin's permission. And he makes very first Akraman or invasion of Devagiri in 1296 CE. Okay.
And Devagiri in present day.
Devagiri is what we call as modern day Aurangabad. It is exactly the fort of Daulatabad, which is near Ellora. Okay, and it is a very beautiful, and it is one of the most impregnable forts of India. And its architecture is marvelous. And probably when we will have next podcast on forts of India, then we'll definitely include Devagiri in it. So for such a difficult place as Devagiri, Alauddin Khilji was able to conquer it. He was able to bring Ramachandra Deva, who was the king of Devagiri, the Yadava king, uh, to terms with him. He was able to extract a revenue from him, and he looted Devagiri practically. He got a lot of booty, he got a lot of elephants, warfare items, ammunitions, as well as gold from Daulatabad, and he took all of it, and he was marching northwards to meet his uncle at Kara. I think Kara falls in Uttar Pradesh. So this sack of Devagiri was not sanctioned by Jalaluddin Khilji, and Jalaluddin Khilji, in fact, became very uh, insecure that what Alauddin is up to, like why he's doing it without my permission. So Jalaluddin Khilji was definitely was angry with him, and Alauddin pretended to be sorry, and he invited his uncle at Kara that let's meet their uncle, and I'll surrender all the booty that I acquired from Devagiri. I'll give it to you, and let's be family once again, and let's forget all of this. I'm still loyal to his what he said. But under Alauddin Khilji had certain friends who instigated him to revolt, and that was Alauddin's plan all along. So when he met his uncle Jalaluddin at Kara, he grabbed him, matlab, gale mila unse, just as you have seen in the movie Padmavat. He embraced him and he assassinated him. He had other people, other mercenaries placed in close vicinity, and they came and they attacked Jalaluddin Khilji and they killed him. And afterwards, they beheaded his corpse, and उसके सर को एक भाले पर लगा के they paraded it across the military. And that is how Alauddin Khilji became the Sultan of Delhi at that point in time. So this is another interesting coup that happens in the medieval India, and it changes a lot of things in medieval politics, in the politics of Sultanate and the rest of the Indian subcontinent. This is what we will call as the palace coup, because it is happening within the immediate bloodline where this nephew is murdering and sacking uncle, and he is appropriating the throne for himself. And it is quite successful is because Jalaluddin, we don't know what exactly was going on in Jalaluddin's head, but Alauddin was very clear cut that I have to become the Sultan of India. And in that process, after becoming the Sultan, he resumed his uh, excursions towards the Western India, Northwestern India, as well as the Southern India. Like as we know from the epic poetry Padmavat, right? That he focused in the Rajputana, he captured Ranthambore, and he captured the Vaghelas, he sacked Gujarat, he sacked Devagiri once again in 1306 CE, whereby Ramachandra Deva became absolutely powerless, and the Devagiri Samrajya, the Yadava Samrajya, it fell since that point in time. He continued his excursion in Warangal, which is near to Hyderabad, and he deposed Kakatiyas of Warangal. He got a lot of wealth from there. And by this point, he had found a very good partner and a beloved lover who was Malik Kafur. And Malik Kafur used to carry out Alauddin's mission in South India. Malik Kafur invaded the Kakatiya, as I was mentioning, and he went as far as Dwarasamudra, which is in the vicinity of present-day Somanatha and Halebedu in Karnataka, and he sacked Dwarasamudra. He caused a lot of ruckus and destruction, material destruction over there. A lot of booty was gained from there, and Malik Kafur was even able to conquer Srirangam as well as, I'm not sure Chidambaram, but Srirangam definitely. He went into Chola territories as well.
Wow.
So, not Aurangzeb, Alauddin's coup was able to gain this much of, amass this much of wealth, and he created loyal people, loyal figures such as Malik Kafur and Ulugh Khan, who did his biddings for him in the rest of the Indian subcontinent. And he was stable, but not for long, because when Alauddin Khilji died, Malik Kafur staged another coup, and he installed his son, uh, Shahabuddin Omar, in Alauddin's place. And there are even stories which say that when Alauddin was on his deathbed, I think he died very young. He was not old when he died. He was barely in his 50s, I think. So there are stories which say that Malik Kafur actually assassinated Alauddin Khilji, but there is no definitive source to say that. But no matter what, as soon as Alauddin Khilji passed away, Malik Kafur took the charge of the Khilji kingdom, and because he was a slave, he cannot rule himself. He installed Shahabuddin Omar, who was son of Khilji, and he was a puppet king for Malik Kafur. And soon after, the Tughlaqs rose, and even Alauddin Khilji's dynasty fell down. You see, so there is a saying that a coup invites a coup. So if there has been a coup, if you started with a coup, then probably you will end with a coup.
Got it.
So that's what happened with Alauddin Khilji.
And now for the number one spot.
The number one spot, I think it is claimed by the first well-known coup in India, and there are a lot of opinions whether one should even call it coup or not. But for the sake of this conversation, I will think that it is a coup, but which transformed into a great revolution, great political revolution in ancient India, and that was the rise of Chandragupta Maurya. So the exact circumstances in which Chandragupta Maurya was brought up is not still known. And again, as I was mentioning earlier, in the case of Pushyamitra Shunga, most of the information we have are from literature. Have are from religious literature, from popular tellings and retellings of these stories. So at that time, India was divided into Janapadas and Mahajanapadas, right? So Janapadas came much earlier, but it was the time of Mahajanapadas where there were oligarchies and democracies in the Gangetic belt, and there were different Mahajanapadas. There was Koshala, there was Magadha, there was a Shakya, Lichavis were there. But Magadha was the most powerful of all. It was most affluent, and it was ruled by the Nanda kings. And the last ruler among the Nandas was Dhananand. And I'm talking about the time period which goes back to 3rd century BCE, and this was also the time when Alexander was invading the eastern world, the Orient, and he came as far as Punjab. He defeated Ambhi, and he conquered Porus there, and he was trying to put his attention towards the central India, the main core of India, the crux of India.
But he died.
But yeah, but no, but he did not die immediately, but there was some repelling force. I don't know. There are different reasons that why Alexander did not invade the central India, because he was thinking that the Mahajanapada alliance could come into force, or maybe he was content with what he had done and he took a U-turn back to the west. And also there were internal reasons that why Alexander had to turn back, because his army was exhausted, because they had been out of their homes for years, and a lot of people died actually in the due to various circumstances such as war and health reasons, because of the change of climate and living conditions, and they were displeased. So maybe that's why Alexander had to turn back. But back in Magadha Empire, back in the Magadhan kingdom, Chanakya was very worried about Alexander's presence in India, because he was able to sense that regardless if Alexander comes or not, but he will still leave a legacy. He will leave people over there who can cause a lot of issues, who can cause a lot of political instabilities and external threats to India. And according to the story, we get to know that Dhanananda did not pay attention to Chanakya's uh, advice. That Chanakya told him that, Alexander is coming, we should buckle up and face him. But apparently, Dhanananda, he insulted Chanakya. Again, we don't know what Dhanananda's stance at this point was, because we get to know the stories from literature, of course. Nonetheless, it is said that Chanakya was insulted, he was called names, and Chanakya ne apna shikar khol ke, he went away. He went to Takshila. I will destroy. He went to Takshila, taking a vow, taking a shapat कि मैं धनानंद को destroy कर दूंगा, and I will establish a new kingdom in its place. So by the twist of fate, it is said that Chanakya found Chandragupta as a kid playing, and he soon realized that Chandragupta is going to be that kid, because he had certain qualities. He exhibited certain qualities in behavior, as well as his physical description was very suitable to that of a king, according to the legends. So Chanakya takes Chandragupta, young Chandragupta, under his wing, and he takes him to Takshila. He trains him, and uh, around Punjab and Takshila regions, Chandragupta is able to raise an army. Okay, and this army, which is comprising of a lot of non-military people, they come together and they march towards Patliputra, they march towards Magadha, and part by part they're able to dismantle the Magadhan Empire. First they attack the frontiers, so first they attack the outside portion, and then they move towards the capital. They are able to defeat Dhanananda. Some sources say that Dhanananda eventually surrendered, while some sources say that Dhanananda put up a fight, because, of course, he was the king of Magadha and he had a lot of resources, powerful army at his disposal. Nonetheless, Chandragupta Maurya was able to conquer Dhanananda. Okay, and ultimately he was crowned as the king of Magadha, and later he went on to conquest the rest of India, by which he became the first emperor, first monarch of India. So there are different perspectives whether one should call it as a coup or not, because coup happens internally, and while most of the Chandragupta's activities are happening different at a distance, at a great distance from the capital, right? But there are certain religious literature, there are certain sources which say that Chandragupta was in fact an illegitimate child of Dhanananda, and he was born to a low caste mother apparently, whose family business was to look after the peacocks. They were peacock rears, hence they were called as Mauryas apparently, according to these sources. So probably Chandragupta had some beef against Dhanananda, who knows, but eventually Chanakya was able to manifest that into a bigger cause, and Chanakya had Chandragupta installed at the throne of Patli. And the reason that it is ranked first at number one is because the entire political organization of India is changing with the advent of Mauryas. The entire bureaucratic systems are changing, and more foreign involvement is seen, because India is becoming a territory which is ready to be globalized in a much better way, uh, with the foreign exchanges, with foreign interchanges. The internal bureaucratic system of Mauryas is very strong, because they're able to effectively manage different territories, over a great geographical expanse. They are going as far as Afghanistan, they're reaching as far as Dravida, they're conquering north, west, east, south, and they have proper control over their bureaucrats who act as governors of prominent cities, cities such as Ujjain, cities such as Varanasi, cities such as Pratishtana, and like different places in India at that time.
Now, two honorable mentions that didn't make this cut.
Yeah. Interestingly, both the honorable mentions come from Mughal dynasty, and the first one is quite interesting and it's quite funny also. So it comes from the time of Mughal Emperor Jahangir. Okay, so Jahangir, the circumstances in which he became Mughal emperor are quite disturbing, and he was not initially favored by Emperor Akbar, but eventually Jahangir prevailed. He became the Mughal emperor, and his intrigue with Noor Jahan is also very controversial because Noor Jahan was Sher Khan's wife, and apparently
Got
Jahangir,
yeah.
yeah, Jahangir had him assassinated to get closer to Noor Jahan. But eventually, Noor Jahan, when she became the queen, empress of India, she had great political power, which was never before seen in Indian history or in Mughal history at least. She used to issue royal firmans on Jahangir's behalf, the privilege which only Jahangir had. Okay. And Noor Jahan had great direct involvement in courtly politics. She used to preside over darbars at certain times. And there were different allegiances within the Mughal court that were favored by Jahangir, which were not seen in a positive light by Noor Jahan. One such allegiance was by a man called as Zamana Beg, who was given the title of Mahabad Khan. And this Mahabad Khan, he wielded great military power. He was given Mansabdari of 4,000 and later 7,000. And he had a great history. Actually, he came from Kabul and he became a native of Mughal court. And his presence during Mughal events, Mughal family events such as the तुला भरण, जब मुगल कुमारों को, मुगल राजकुमारों को आप तराजू में तोलते थे एंड उनके वजन का जो भी सोना वगैरह रहता था आप गरीबों में बांटते थे. So Mahabad Khan was present during such events as well. So he was very close to Emperor Jahangir. So Noor Jahan, she did not like this thing and she created certain controversies. She put Mahabad Khan into certain controversies which distanced him from the emperor. So Mahabad Khan, he became very powerful. He was very ambitious. So he wanted to take some action because he was being laden with accusations of corruptions of, going against the imperial authority. So during one particular time when Jahangir was very ill, it was around the winter of 1626, and Jahangir wanted to go to Kabul, but they stopped at the river Jhelum to rest. And Mahabad Khan, he approaches with his Rajput warriors and he arrests Mughal emperor.
Hmm.
He literally arrests Mughal emperor, okay? And he has him taken to a tent and प्रॉपर एकदम राजपूत का जो गार्ड है वो चारों तरफ बना दिया रहता है. नूर जहां शी इज नॉट एट दैट पॉइंट
Yeah.
close to him, and Noor Jahan tells him, Noor Jahan wants to get Jahangir back, and she thinks how. So she feigns surrender. She tells that I surrender to you. Please leave the emperor. So when, as an instrument of surrender, Noor Jahan, she herself, she comes to Jhelum and she enters Jahangir's tent and she offers her surrender. And Mahabad Khan is relaxed कि चलो भाई emperor और empress दोनों ने surrender कर दिया. And Noor Jahan takes advantage of that particular instance, and she creates discord between the Rajput warriors of Mahabad Khan's camp, and she breaks his regime internally. Okay, and Mahabad Khan goes as far as declaring himself the emperor of India at
Yeah.
the time. And then again, Noor Jahan is able to secure Jahangir's and herself's freedom, and Mahabad Khan has to flee, so he flees to Deccan, and he stays incognito for some time. And Mahabad Khan has to be punished, but fortunately for him, the very next year, Emperor Jahangir passes away because of his ill health, and there is no authority to punish Mahabad Khan. And soon, Shah Jahan, Prince Khurram, who became Shah Jahan, he comes to the power and he reconciles with Mahabad Khan. And guess what? Like Mahabad Khan, he is given back his territories, he is given back his governorship, and is not executed. So we would expect that a person like Mahabad Khan would be killed because a person before Mahabad Khan, he was Khan Jahan Lodi. He tried to do a similar thing, and Khan Jahan Lodi, he was decapitated, he was humiliated even after his death for such an attempt. But Mahabad Khan was spared, and like he even himself and his sons, they were granted privileges after Shah Jahan came to power.
In fact, if I'm not wrong, in this
Yeah,
incident when Jahangir was arrested, even a young Aurangzeb and his brother were there, right, with him.
I don't think so. I think they were elsewhere.
I when so they were his grandchildren, and I from some accounts that I've read, at least, well, this is so. I remember there was this series of books that came out called Empire of the Mughal
Yeah,
by
yeah,
Alex Rutherford, I think, and
yeah.
that used to come out. One book was coming out every year about each king, and it ended. I think Babur,
Yes, yes.
Humayun, Akbar, Jahangir, Shah Jahan, Aurangzeb, and those were the six that came out. And if I'm not wrong, in the one about Jahangir, it was mentioned that when he was arrested, even in his camp, in fact, I don't think he was arrested because he was going for war or something. I think he was just going for a general tour of his
He
kingdom.
was going to Kabul, maybe because somebody recommended that you go to some cooler territories. He around that time during the later stages of his life, Jahangir was very much relaxed and he was touring Kashmir and
Addicted
Kabul.
to opium.
Yeah, he was addicted to opium actually.
Yeah, that's what I've read. And he had the two grandchildren. He wanted to take them as well. That
Yes, yes.
accompany him on a royal tour, and that's when he got arrested. So the account, at least what Rutherford says, was that Aurangzeb and I don't know if it was his younger brother or elder brother, but they were both.
Shah Suja, maybe. Like I'm not sure about the involvement of the grandchildren
Yeah,
at
yeah.
back
But
then.
anyways, eventually they were released. So that
Yeah.
was first tryst with being captured and understanding how uh, deceitful politics is. And
So an emperor for the 100 days, Mahabad Khan, he is.
right. And what is the second honorable mention?
Second honorable mention comes much after Jahangir. It comes after the death of Aurangzeb, when Mughal emperor is Shah Alam. Okay, and Shah Alam is Shah Alam the second. And Shah Alam the second is very weak Mughal emperor, and like he's toy for everybody. And there is a popular saying that Sultanat e Shah Alam as Delhi ta palam. ये शाह आलम की सल्तनत बस दिल्ली से पालम तक. He was such a weak Mughal emperor at that point, and he was largely dependent on other people's other parties to secure his position, and his most important allies were Marathas. So Shah Alam, during a particular time, he had a beef with Ghulam Qadir. Ghulam Qadir's father, who was uh, ruler of Kabul, I think, who was a chieftain over there. And Ghulam Qadir, he was taken as a slave by Shah Alam when he was young, and he was kept at Delhi. And eventually, Ghulam Qadir was released when his father passed away, and he got repatriated to Afghanistan. But he came back with a great resentment, and at that time, Shah Alam's condition was very bad. The Mughal court and the Mughal imperial army was very weak because of a lot of factionalism and a lot of issues that were going on during the contemporary times. So Ghulam Qadir comes around 1788 and he captures Delhi. He seizes Delhi, he seizes the Mughal throne, and he goes as far as blinding Shah Alam II. And he even disgraces a lot of Mughal princes and princesses. There is an account where he mentions that he made Mughal princesses dance, apparently. So this is the greatest blow to the dignity of Mughal Empire, and it was seen in a very bad light from by all the powerful people in the contemporary times. Like even though people hated Mughals, but such uh, you know such disgrace being accorded to the Mughal family, the Mughal Empire was offensive for a lot of people, and especially for Marathas. And eventually, Marathas under Mahadaji Shinde, they came to Delhi. Uh, by that point, Ghulam Qadir he made an escape, but eventually he was captured and he was executed. He was brutally executed, and his sliced ears and eyes they were sent to Shah Alam. And this is a sole instance which is happening, but this is a very gruesome, we can say. And no matter how much one a person can hate Mughals, but I think when they will read this particular account, they will be taken aback because it's very shocking to say the least.
Yeah,
Because when you imagine powerful people like Emperor Akbar, Alamgir, Aurangzeb, Shah Jahan, and Jahangir, something happening, something of this level, such a base level happening to their family, where an external person, not even a powerful person, such some tribal chieftain is coming and is blinding emperor and disgracing the royal family. I think it's certainly a very bad thing. But to call it a coup would be a mistake, because again he did not have any political ambitions as such, though he tried to depose the king and place some other puppet at his place. But then again, Ghulam Qadir had no long-standing political ambitions, and he had nothing to do with, uh, you know, the Mughal authority, or he had nothing to change in administration, or he had no beef with any other parties such as Jats, Rajputs, or Marathas, right? So he was just there for the fun, which according to him he had, and like he was killed after that.
One interesting topic that's emerging across all our discussions is the role of kingmakers, potentially.
Role of kingmakers.
Right. I think we totally underestimate the role they play even in power and politics today, in corporate world today, in every sphere. I mean, even the Indian cricket team, there's always a kingmaker somewhere in the selection team on BCCI, someone whose blessing is like, that's it. If that person's blessing is there, matlab kitna bhi kharab performance ho, you'll make it to the team. There's always that one, or there's always one of those people who have a lot of influence, and they've never officially held too many titles, but somewhere they command a lot of respect, and almost always it's due to longevity more than anything else, that across regimes they still manage to carve a place out for themselves and adapt, and eventually they have the experience, probably the wisdom as well. But I think this is a topic worth exploring about, the evolution.
Definitely, definitely.
And
The great thing about kingmakers is that with very minimal engagement, with very minimal on the field engagement, by sitting back in the court, they are able to orchestrate certain things. They are able to orchestrate certain policies and strategies which can change the shape of the entire landscape of the region. So even like it is prevalent in Indian history, and kingmakers, they have more powerful positions than king at most of the times.
even in the US, it's always it's an unsaid thing, but there's always one industrial person, one industrialist, one person from the corporate world, one person from the tech world now. So
Absolutely.
always there's been that one person whose approval has been paramount for the president to get elected. Earlier it used to be I mean, I'm sure it was one of those robber barons, the oil guys. Those families eventually became dynasties in their own right without achieving absolute political power, but nevertheless having enough political sway and influence to dictate and guide affairs. But now that
See, in the larger scheme of things, we see that how America is acting as kingmaker in local politics, in regional politics. Like we see in annexation of Sikkim, that their involvement in Nepal crisis in the
Venezuela,
Western world, right, in the Middle East. So they are trying to place their own barons at different places, so that uh, they will work for their benefit. They will work for their policies, right? So I think that's a game of kingmakers, and not even politicians. It's ultimately the people sitting behind,
yeah,
as it trickles down to modern politics and affairs.
that was the MO that made AI successful as well. So when I was
Absolutely.
watching have you seen this series called The Turning Point? And
No, I don't think so.
you can watch it on Netflix. It's basically about all events leading up from the bomb, in
Mhm.
particular the Hiroshima Nagasaki bomb, to an invasion of Ukraine in 2022. So everything, sort of all the major parts of the Cold War and how that evolved,
Exactly.
that led up to this. And in one of those, it covered the CIA in a lot of detail, because unlike what a lot of people believe, the CIA is actually not a very old organization. It was formed post World War II only. In fact, America realized that it needed to have military capabilities and military strength of its own. Before that, their involvement in World War One was very late and not as much.
Exactly. I
Um,
think America made a lot of difference, lot of intervention only in World War Two.
exactly, and that was also, they were provoked and then they got into it.
Exactly.
Uh, After that, they realized that the only way to assert, I mean, while they were definitely, they by then become the economic powerhouse of the world, they realized that the only way to assert our supremacy as the number one economy in the world is A, to have a military capability where no one can mess with us. And therefore, that allowed them to then exert that influence, especially in a world which was then divided into two blocks, which was,
The Cold War era.
yeah, I don't think personally it was from where the way I saw what I saw in the documentary, it wasn't as if principles of communism and socialism were extremely dissatisfactory or something that they resented. It was just that they
Hmm.
realized that this was the one major power which was communist, and therefore we have to stand against it with our own ideals, and therefore we have to build that up.
Exactly.
And the CIA, the MO that they used to operate with in the 50s and 60s, I mean, earlier they had a lot of failures. In fact, if you remember, there was this Bay of Pigs incident in Cuba.
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
The Cubans were already alerted about American invasion of the Bay of Pigs, and
Yes, yes.
Castro already knew about it. And therefore, it led to their entire escalation where Russians moved troops over there, and then they had that entire period, those 10, 30, 12 days where JFK negotiated, they don't bomb. But
I
towards the
think this is prior to Cuban Missile Crisis, right?
this is the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
This is a
Hmm.
precursor to it. But
Yes.
in the late 60s and 70s onwards, they started installing puppet governments in Latin
Especially you see at Vietnam, you see at Korea, all these places.
America was where they were very successful. Um, Korea, whatever, you had a division. One went to the side of communism. One took the democratic path.
Exactly. So
But
this alignment policy of the Cold War era, something which India was largely away from because of its non-alignment policy. But this alignment caused a lot of puppet governments and psycho funds for America and for Russia to be placed in the top bureaucratic positions or ruling positions in these different countries.
since we're on this subject, I always have this feeling where uh, alignment or not. Today we are talking about Viksit Bharat. Economic progress is the only way out. We need economic independence. Yet, we have been able to assert very little economic prowess or economic might on the world. Right. In fact, the whole world economy is about 110 trillion. India constitutes about 4 trillion, but we're the
Mm.
most populated country. And
Yes.
and I always wonder, because was non-alignment the right move for us from that perspective? Because Japan was annexed and they had to obey certain conditions that the US set for.
Hmm.
And just by chance, because of their involuntary alignment with Americans who still had control over the Japanese for the 6 7 years after World War II ended,
Mhm.
they transformed that into a manufacturing hub and showed what democracy and capitalism.
Exactly. The rise of Japan is certainly an example, like despite whatever happened and how they rose up, how they set their own footing in the post World War era. It is
Exactly, and very soon that turnaround.
very soon, like by 60s, you had bullet trains, you had big establishments, brands coming up, and
Yeah,
they were dominating electronics. And the great thing about Japan is that they never left their culture behind. They actually made their culture known to the world. And gradually, but it came with a great bounce, I would say. It came with a great impact to the Western world.
exactly. In fact, there used to be these things where the Americans propped up the Japanese to show
Yeah.
the rest of the world that if you align with us, this is what your fortune, how your fortunes can change. Korea followed suit in some way or shape and became one of those export-led economies as well. But
Correct.
somewhere our policy of non-alignment, socialism, also
I think
because it's very
it
diverse.
sounded good on paper, but then again, a lot of things did change after in the post Nehru world. I would say that in the post Nehru world, I think Indian politics became a great playground for different people, for people of different alignments, and the kind of governments as we see during Indira Gandhi's time, that it eventually devolved into a very authoritarian kind of setup. Uh,
Yeah.
and lot of, I think, India's participation in Bangladesh war is also, has something to contribute to it, right?
Just,
Though we were calling ourselves a military power at the center by because we were winning against Pakistan in the 1965, again in 1971. That was some redeeming aspect of India, but it did not help us in growing as an economy, I would say.
yes. Whereas I would feel like we're aligned with possibly the US and the Western bloc of
Yeah,
us. We may have been living a different story today, because look at what
yes,
happened.
could be,
Is
could
that
be.
we are going through what India is where China was in the 90s and 2000s,
Exactly.
where Japan and
India is where Singapore was back in the time.
correct, but very those countries, because of obviously a heterogeneous population plus the blessings of bigger powers like America and whatever the fading powers of Britain were
Mm.
at the time, in Singapore especially, they allowed those economies to grow. I think they also realized that if we need to make a mark in this world and preserve our own independence while also making other countries economically dependent on us, we still can't let go of these powers and let's borrow the best systems from them and then see where we stand.
Correct.
Whereas today, I think we live with American ideals of democracy, British system of bureaucracy, but with the economy of a third world,
Very structural, functional setup that we live in.
doesn't make sense at all. So, yes, awesome, great
Thank you, Karan. It
having this
was so
theory.
lovely. I think while discussing this particular topic, we ventured into a lot of different aspects of
Just something
politics,
to think
society.
about. It's just something.
Exactly, exactly. I think this got our gears running more than any other podcast.
Yeah. Anyways, yes.
Yes.